I've always been on the fence about this game, but you're pretty good. Pretty good. You're pretty good.
Khalil, I grow faint.
What are you talking about? No one could foil your strategy.
No, you don't understand. It is but a mask I wear.
Professor, get to the point.
Ah, you could say that I always keep my emotions on guard.
Look, it can't be that bad, so spare me all the melodrama.
Listen to me. I'm not the kingpin everyone thinks I am.
Oh, okay. Wow, so you really are down in the gutter.
Truly, it's as if though I am always walking on pins and needles.
That's rough. I mean, I guess I can see now why you'd be feeling so split.
Please, understand. I must strike out if I'm able to gain what I want.
Perhaps your strength could serve to heal these wounds.
Alas, the birdie hit the glass. Will she ever fly again?
I wouldn't worry. No one's ever been able to match your skills.
Funny, all this talk, it is very much like Juri Arisugawa from popular 1997 anime Revolutionary Girl Utena, the subject of today's video.
What is all of your racket about this time?
Love.
Miki and Nanami, 7th grade. Toga and Saionji, 11th grade. And between those two age demographics of the student council sits Juri Arisugawa, grade 10, one leg crossed over the other, silently musing as the talking heads shout over each other. At council meetings, when Juri does speak up, it's usually to question or lightly challenge someone else's ideas, not to make any bold proposals of her own. Juri may be suspicious of Toga and curious about End of the World, but often she acts like the concerns of the student council aren't her concerns. Juri doesn't care about the Rose Bride, and she rarely talks about revolution. Maybe Juri gets along so well with Miki because they're both by the books, and more studious than the playboy prince and the wannabe Byronic hero, as Giovanna of Empty Movement describes their roles.
Toga's the president, Saionji the vice president, and Miki's the record keeper. Juri's role in the Seitokai is also well defined. Juri is the group's ambassador. It's her we see interacting with the faculty concerning school politics.
To paraphrase Giovanna, Juri distracts herself with the student council, the fencing club, the fashion modeling, all that faculty drama and school rumors, and sometimes, yes, bowling with her ball, all so she doesn't have to think quite so much about her own private suffering. This otherwise quiet student council member is thrust into the spotlight at Otori Academy through her position as the captain of the fencing club. It might be what Juri is most widely known for, and it's certainly what's garnered her adoring fans among the student population. In their essay for Empty Movement, titled Two Princes, Ashnod notes how, despite being an antagonist to Utena, Juri isn't usually cruel. When one of her fencing students is injured, Juri takes time to console them and even goes so far as to visit them in the hospital, just to make sure that they're doing okay. So on one hand, Juri appears supportive with her team, but on the other hand, she has this reputation for being scary and intimidating. Are her public acts of kindness just that? Acts? To keep face with the world? Or is her heart, in fact, soft, and her nature actually kinda sweet? The Digital Dream Club has argued that Juri keeps up this facade of order and structure as a sort of mask to hide behind, and as a closet to hide inside. As they put it so well,
she is the heroine of a tragedy, her own tragedy, but she's not the only one, and her pain is not special.
The notion of Juri herself being a heroine has appealed to fans over the years, and to me, the act of talking about Juri can be as intimidating as Juri herself. And that's because she's always been one of the hardest Utena characters for me to get. Yet at the same time, she's one of the fan favorites. So I feel a bit of pressure to do this right. In many ways, Juri is almost Prince material. Aside from some rare outbursts, she normally doesn't take out her aggression on others or stoop to manipulation. She has a nobility to her that sets her apart and above. Meanwhile, if the duels in Utena represent battles of will, then certainly Juri has one of the strongest wills at Atori Academy. Also, note that Juri never really loses to Utena in a fight. In her final duel, Juri removes her own rose, and in her first duel, Juri is poised for victory, but loses to a perfectly placed 1 in a billion swordfall. And you could immediately read this loss not as the result of Juri's lack of skill, but as the result of Anthe's own involvement. Utena bit off a bit more than she could chew, facing the fencing captain. So Anthe interfered with her magic to cause a miracle. Call it wishful thinking, perhaps. But since Juri doesn't know about Anthe's power, this may very well have appeared to her as a true miracle. And it also may have then appeared that Utena is the kind of girl that miracles happen to. And Juri rages against the idea of miracles. She says she fights to disprove the power of miracles. Miracles. And Juri rages against this idea of miracles. Miki fights for his shining thing. Saionji fights for something eternal. Toga and Nanami also fight for their desires, but Juri claims to fight against something. To disprove the power of miracles. Yet, as Giovanna argues,
her adamant denial of miracles would have started out not as a fear of getting one, but as anger for not getting one when she needed it. Juri wasn't always a malcontent, and there was a time when she thought she might have a chance. When she found she didn't, Juri became bitter with the loss, feeling if she didn't get that one miracle, they clearly don't exist.
Juri has had to build everything with her own hands and rise to the top with her own skill. Miracles have never saved her before. No prince trotted in to wipe away her tears. Still, I don't think Juri is against hope. She may still, deep down, want her own miracle to come true, but you won't catch her wishing upon a star or upside-down castle. Speaking of the castle, seeing that spectacle of a so-called miracle is what Giovanna notes pushed Juri to join the Duelist game. Someone calling themselves End of the World was making claims about a power to bring world revolution. Was Juri proceeding with trepidation and skepticism, ready to shatter this fantasy? Or was she as enamored by it as much as the others, drawn to that possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was finally her chance for a miracle? After all, Juri didn't want to change the world. She just wanted to change someone's heart. The name Juri can be translated to tree glass. This could be arbitrary, but it's more fun if we read into it, right? So, perhaps Juri is like a glass tree. She is strong and sturdy like a tree, but when it comes to her emotions, she's as fragile as glass. And when shattered, be careful not to get cut. And then there's Arisugawa, which can translate into English as river existence, or, maybe a bit more naturally, lives with the river. While I don't think this would ever have been the intention from the start of the show, Arisugawa's name is oh so on the nose with the story Juri tells at the end of the anime series, the story about the boy drowning in the river to save Juri's sister, the story that would go on to be so informative in the film Adolescence of Utena. And taken more broadly, Arisugawa, living with the river, can mean constant motion, something Juri aspires to, while in other ways, she's still stuck, frozen in the past. We see Juri and Utena talking by the water, as two statues are reflected on the surface. One, the goddess of beauty, Venus. The other, the goddess of the sea, Neptune. Beyond beauty, Venus can represent love, desire, sex, fertility, prosperity, and victory. Juri Arisugawa, a Venus of sorts, a beautiful mess fueled by spurned desire and unrequited love, appearing to all in prosperity and glamour and victory, but denied the hope of what she really wanted most of all. And back to that conversation by the water. Juri absolutely goes off on Utena, gets all up in her face, and is mostly right. I mean, all of Utena's mush about the prince, all her naive sentimentality, Juri is right that this is all an illusion that threatens to blind Utena. So, preach, Juri! Yet, like so many characters in Utena, it doesn't seem like Juri realizes the full implications of her own advice for herself. Everyone in Utena is giving advice they don't really know how to follow through with in their own lives. It's pretty normal for teenagers especially to not know what they really want when their needs and wants can get so mixed up and conflicting. In Juri's case, is she yelling at Utena to wake her up? Or is Juri yelling at Utena because she sees herself in Utena? Our pink-haired heroine clings onto a blind hope and derives power from it. And I think that makes Juri angry to see herself reflected so well in someone else. Both girls aspire to be independent, but they also both dependently cling to people who aren't really there for them. But unlike Utena, Juri's attachment isn't to a prince, and it isn't giving her power. Quietly, it's killing her inside. The Shadow Girls weigh in with a play, in which a girl is glad she got a cold, so she can't go to the zoo. But she clearly still wants to go to the zoo. Replace zoo with miracles, and this becomes one of the more transparent shadow plays in the whole series. Juri, despite everything she says, is holding out for a miracle. The first Juri duel song is about the miracle of birth, but it's also about living beings seeking a false light of returning to that beginning, to the womb, or childhood, or traveling all the way to a distant past. Mentions of not being born, mentions of the void, repetitions of being hollow inside. Juri fights to win, but in truth, she lost what was most important to her years ago. And for all her ability and prince-like traits, Juri can't do anything about it, because, for once, her life wasn't in her own hands. Her life was in Shiori's. Miki has his sunlit garden, and Juri has her own flashback in episode 7, Unfulfilled Juri. Images of a girl and a boy who were once close to Juri. Shiori thought Juri loved that boy, so Shiori took him from her. But Juri never was in love with the boy. No, the one who is preserved forever in Juri's locket, the one always hanging below her head and near her heart, the one Juri was always in love with, was Shiori. In the episode 7 commentary, director Kunihiko Ikehara stated,
"This story came together quickly as a story about relationships. He and she only appear within Juri's memories. The first draft ended on a could-it-be sort of note. As the script was finalized, I decided to come right out and say she was in love with a girl. Juri's story is a metaphor of unrequited love. If you watch it from that perspective, I think it's an easy one for anyone to understand."
The generalities and particularities are both important, I think. In general, this is a story of unreturned, one-sided love. And if you frame it this way, Juri's pain is almost universal, especially since she is a teen girl in the 10th grade. I could see a lot of people relating to that sort of pain, and also her response of bottling it up inside and faking strong. But in particular, Juri was in love with another girl, Shiori, and I think the specifics of her love matter, for both Juri herself and for the audience. The world of Revolutionary Girl Utena isn't 100% our world. Otori Academy has a sister school in Amsterdam, they also have India, and if Nanami's English dub is to be believed, Utena is in fact Miss Self-Sufficient USA, which would indicate that the United States is actually canon in the anime. But just as Otori Academy is separated from the outside world and bound by a certain magic, Revolutionary Girl Utena isn't one-to-one with our own world. It is a fairy tale place, like a dream or a hazy memory. All this is to say that I don't know for certain how gay relationships are viewed in Utena's world. There's tons of homoeroticism with Toga, Akio, and Saionji, but then Toga has that really strange moment where he lectures Nanami about how it's natural and right for men and women to be together, that liking girls more is against God's ways. And Wakaba only seems to be joking whenever she calls Utena her girlfriend or boyfriend. Sure, Wakaba often jumps up and latches onto Utena, nearly sending both of them plummeting and hurtling out the window to their deaths. But I think for Wakaba, she thinks of this as friends playing pretend roles, while each wait for their respective male princes. So for all the magic and wonder of Otori Academy and Revolutionary Girl Utena, I think the closet still exists. Maybe it's more open than in real life late 90s Japan. Maybe it's the same. Maybe it's worse. But when Juri realized that she was in love with another girl, I think the particular gender dynamic of that situation pushed her to keep it hidden. I don't know if we have any way of knowing for sure, but when things went horribly wrong with Shiori, maybe Juri internalized it, and a whispering voice inside her told her, "This is what you get for falling in love with another girl." We know people can feel that way in our world. And for the audience, I think Juri's sexuality is really important. Juri may be positioned as an opponent to Utena, but she is also a driven, capable, and accepted person within her community. And showing that this strong person can fall in love with someone of the same gender helps, I think, normalize same-sex attraction and the possibility of same-sex romance. I think I can see why Juri's feelings and struggles have really resonated with a lot of people. Juri fights to be so independent and stand on her own 2 feet, but between the constant struggles and the work of putting on an act of strength for the world, she gets home sometimes exhausted and sometimes numb, but she fights on day in and day out. It was never Juri's fault what happened with Shiori. No more than it was Miki's fault for getting sick before the piano performance that fractured his relationship with his sister. Juri is awesome at everything she does, when she's in control. But when Shiori held Juri's emotions and life in the palm of her hand, what Shiori chose to do with that power, that wasn't something Juri could control. And unfortunately for Juri, she fell in love with a rose that bound her in thorns.
Shiori Takatsuki attended Otori Academy with Juri in the student council arc of the series. Shiori is a shadow that continues to loom over Juri's life, but the wounds aren't fresh. After all, Shiori had transferred out and was not attending Otori High School until, suddenly, she returned. Why she left and why she's back is not all clear, but Shiori is here to stay. She watches Juri fence from her perch on high, and she talks to Utena and Anthe upon moving into the dorms. Shiori tells them that she and Juri were more than childhood friends, that they really grew up together. While glancing out the window, Shiori talks to Juri with more specific reverence, mentioning how wonderful she is, how strong and imposing she is, how she was her protector. The word prince isn't said, but it can be inferred. To anyone who will listen, Shiori appears by all accounts to truly admire Juri. And when Shiori finally catches up with her childhood friend, she confronts the strain between them directly. Shiori explained that she eventually did break up with that boy from the past, and now she wishes to return to how things used to be. But when Juri reveals she never had been in love with that boy, and thus she doesn't hold any ill will toward her, instead of showing relief, Shiori's reaction is more akin to distress. Shiori pivots and asks about the locket. If not the boy's picture in there, who is Juri always looking at? It's as if Shiori was banking on Juri's resentment and hoping she'd really hurt her. Now that Shiori has returned to stay, Juri throws the locket away into the river. If Arisugawa is the river, is she truly disposing of the locket, or only burying the person and memory it represents deeper within herself? In any case, the locket, still wet, slips into Shiori's hands, likely by way of outside interference. Mikage and Mamiya had their eyes on the next Black Rose duelist, after all, and this is the push Shiori needs. Now she knows it's her face in the locket. Now Shiori has power. In the essay For Empty Movement, Razara identifies in Shiori a common struggle among adolescent girls. Shiori had been the close friend of someone who always felt better than her, someone she never felt she could match. Juri was talented, beautiful, respected, and feared. Shiori was her shadow, and the result was low self-esteem and jealousy. As Razara puts it,
Shiori did care about Juri. That was the problem. She couldn't understand why someone as amazing as Juri would want to hang around with someone such as herself for any reason other than pity. She thought that the only person she had ever really cared about was only pretending to like her. Had it been taken only seconds sooner, the picture inside of her locket would have been of a very depressed-looking Shiori.
Shiori feels pathetic compared to Juri, so she tries to take something from Juri to feel strong again, but in doing so, she feels even more pathetic and lowly. She was worried that Juri pitied her, but once she found out it was quite a different story, that Juri in fact loved her, that was something Shiori could weaponize. Also writing for Empty Movement, the essayist Ashnod had pointed out that when Shiori speaks to Mikage in the elevator, her estimations of Juri seem to be a bit more skewed. Shiori said that Juri is popular and loved by all, but is that really true? She has fans in her fencing club, certainly, but many others find Juri to be scary and intimidating. So Shiori may be projecting a specific ideal onto Juri, an ideal that exaggerates who Juri really is. Shiori's perception of her has been warped through the years of jealousy. Though her feelings towards Juri aren't justified, that doesn't mean those feelings aren't still real to Shiori. Ashnod also notes that Shiori is the most negatively written Black Rose duelist. Kozui wants to be close to her brother again, Mitsuru wants to be grown up like Nanami, and both Wakaba and Keiko fight for a form of happiness with the person they have feelings for. Shiori, however, can read a lot more negatively to viewers. As the essayist Schmid writes,
in contrast to any other of the characters in Utena, Shiori has no purpose of her own. She simply hates Juri. She hates Juri not for any wrong that Juri has done, but for quite the opposite reason. She hates Juri for Juri's ability, for her nobility, her love, her devotion, her virtue, her kindness, for protecting Shiori when they were younger. In short, she hates Juri for being good. She does not want to exceed Juri, she wants Juri to be dragged down. She does not want to gain, she wants Juri to lose. She does not want happiness or love or any human value. She wants Juri to be deprived of these things. There is no more foul a motivation in the world.
But whether those words are damningly true or instead paint Shiori falsely are in the eyes of each individual viewer. It is easy to see how Shiori can be read as spiteful, hateful, and toxic, but part of what makes her character so compelling is that she's always believable, and for many, relatable. In adolescence, when you never feel like you're as good as your best friend, a rift can form. During the conversation between Shiori and Juri in the Black Rose episode, a bird smacks onto the window. Birds, of course, are big in Revolutionary Girl Utena, the chick that might die if it cannot break out of its shell. The baby birds representing Miki and Kozue the phoenix that is Atori regenerating, and maybe, if you want to stretch it a bit, Saionji cooking eggs off campus. So sure, the bird hitting the glass in this scene is probably metaphorical, but who is the bird? Is Juri the bird, since birds are often duelists? Is this showing how Juri's being injured in an unseen way, as the walls itself is illusory, transparent? By running toward Shiori, even if only emotionally, she gets hurt along the way. Or is the bird Shiori? After all, it hits the glass, and Juri's name, in part, means glass. Juri has been wounded by Shiori, but isn't Shiori also wounded? Not by Juri on purpose, but by running smack into differences between them. Kozue was never the piano player that Miki was. Mitsuru is a regular elementary school boy. Wakaba and Keiko know what it is like to view their princes from outside. Kanae, lest she be forgotten, is yet another comparatively regular person in the presence of elites. Shiori is intensely aware that she lives in a shadow. Shiori confesses immediately to hating Juri since childhood, and now that she knows the truth in the locket, she can feel the sick satisfaction of having beaten her. Shiori has peered through the cracks in Juri's armor and found that, beneath everything, she's also vulnerable. In the episode 28 commentary, Ikuhara writes,
Shiori's character is the embodiment of Juri's weak point. That weak point is love. Breaking apart the other person. That means controlling the other person's life, bending it to your own imaginings in the real world. It's an ultimate form of romance.
Shiori has a lot in common with Anthe. Both of these purple-haired girls give orange roses to Juri, and it's potentially Anthe who planted the pendant for Shiori's awakening. Juri was always there to protect Shiori, the same way Utena would always protect Anthe and would always be there for her friend. Juri even says that Utena is like Shiori, that they're both unintentionally cruel. It's also Anthe that cuts off Utena to tell her bluntly that Shiori hasn't changed. Not one bit. Maybe Anthe can see herself in Shiori and also see her own relationship with Utena reflected in the toxic cycle with Juri. Shiori is empty inside. If she can't have someone love her, she would rather have someone hate her. And in some ways, it's easier for her to keep someone hating her than it is to keep someone loving her. After all, whether it's love or hate, someone is still caring and paying attention to you. Either way, you matter to them. Shiori still cares and feels she needs Juri, but what she's after isn't necessarily closeness. No, Shiori is at so low a point that anything will do. Anything to help her not feel so pathetic. Juri masks her pain by acting cold and indifferent. Shiori masks her pain by acting innocent and sincere. They are awful for each other, but they are also similar. Neither will say what they want, and neither feel they really deserve that happy ending. A bird flies, hits glass, and becomes wounded. Who or what is the bird? Who or what is the glass? It barely matters when the effect is the same. The bird is no longer able to fly on its own.
Shingo Kaneko, who worked on Revolutionary Girl Utena through storyboarding and directing, said in an interview,
In the beginning, Juri wasn't a homosexual character. She had a boyfriend, or a boy that she loved, and that boy told her to believe in miracles. Then, the story went, he left to study abroad and died in an accident while overseas. I suppose Ruka later inherited his character.
Ruka Tsuchiya, who if you squint could sorta look like an Ikahara self-insert OC, is an 11th grade student when he returns to Otori Academy. While he was sick, Juri had filled in as fencing captain, in a similar way to how Nanami had filled in as student council president when Toga was existentially sick. Since Ruka's time in the series is short, he cuts straight to the point and starts barking up the trees of the student council, dishing out letters from End of the World and serving it up Akio's way. Or is he? Ruka may be carpooling with Toga and Akio, but he's only acting like he's interested in being a duelist, when in reality he couldn't possibly care less about their goals. While Nanami and Miki have their fill of letters, Juri doesn't eat, and turns her back to the whole situation. My friend C helped us out with translation, and said that the first letter is an official note to return to the school ASAP, and the third letter is a medical sheet about prescription drugs. So Juri is, in effect, looking away from how sick Ruka really is. Meanwhile, our Azure Prince begins making moves on Shiori, who almost immediately falls in love with him. Although, on that note, her motives are pretty suspect, given her past history, and how she might think Ruka is important to Juri, and thus taking him away from her would be another form of victory, i.e., is she actually in love with Ruka, or does she just want to hurt Juri more by locking lips with him? In either case, according to Ruka himself, Shiori has been busy polishing his sword. And even if we look past the metaphorical potential of that line, the literal situation itself can be a bit confusing. In their essay titled On Guard, Fencing at Otori Academy, Leaf explains that while the other Otori Fencing Club members use epis, Ruka uses a rapier, which isn't standard in modern fencing and isn't used by anyone else in the club. And the sword that falls out of the locker is indeed a rapier, identical to the one that Ruka uses. Although later Ruka will tell Shiori that it wasn't his sword, evidence would suggest that it really was his sword, and later on he's lying to her by saying it wasn't. It can be hard to untangle who exactly is using who. My thinking is that Shiori is trying to steal Ruka to hurt Juri, but at the same time, Ruka is stealing Shiori to help free Juri, while simultaneously dishing out some sweet revenge on Shiori, by way of breaking her heart in the process. Both Shiori and Ruka are using each other to affect Juri, one to bind her and one to set her free. But along the way, Shiori might have actually caught feelings for Ruka, whereas Ruka didn't give two balls about Shiori. I sometimes wish we got to see more from Shiori and Juri's past together, like how we get to see glimpses of Toga and Saionji's history, or more flashbacks from Nanami's childhood. We just don't see it as much with Juri as maybe I would have wanted. But regardless, when Juri says that Shiori is one of her oldest and dearest friends, I believe Ruka knows the real depth of her current feelings. And when he says that Juri has some misconceptions, he means that Juri misunderstands why he's pursuing Shiori in the first place. Ruka means lapis lazuli fruit, and Tsuchiya means soil valley. Ultimately, he provides himself as a soil for the one he loves, so that she may grow. Graham Tedesco Blair describes him as a character who has no tragic flaw. He's part prince, with how he appears out of nowhere to sacrifice himself and save the girl he loves. But it's also possible to read him as yet another arrogant manipulator, and that's personally where I usually lean. Full disclosure, I can't stand Ruka. He's my least favorite character in the anime, and revisiting him for this video hasn't endeared me to him all that much more. After Ruka leads Shiori on, I genuinely feel bad for Shiori, and seriously question how Ruka was treating her. Despite how awful Shiori has been at points, she's still an adolescent girl, and there had to be other ways of helping Juri that didn't involve causing Shiori anguish. Shiori wanted attention, whether positive or negative, and she thought that she had found someone who cared about her, only to realize, all too late, that she was just his pawn. It's absolutely karma, sure, but at the same time, he's really hurting this younger girl. Does adding an additional wrong make it all right? When Ruka loses his duel, he is standing stone-faced. He suspected that he had no chance of winning, and this duel proved it. Ruka smirks and says that they'll keep losing because of the Rose Bride. It's almost like he's really grasping the situation. If he can't beat Utena, then neither can Juri. But Shiori had truly been pulling for a Ruka victory. She has crashed through the windshield and is devastated. Once Ruka is done using her, he walks away and leaves her a sobbing mess. It's no wonder that he can click with manipulators like Toga and Akio. Further, when Ruka is telling Juri how awful Shiori is, and Juri struggles against him, Ruka tells her to stop resisting and forces a kiss onto her. She has to bite his lip to get him to let go of her. This was meant to be a distraction, so he could take the locket from her and try to crush it. But it was also aggression towards Juri, and not consensual. The very idea that Juri's story arc is resolved by some new male prince sweeping in to sacrifice himself for her doesn't sit right with me. And it didn't when I first watched the show, and it still doesn't now. I think that Juri's feelings on Ruka are complicated and confused. And I think that's on purpose. He's important to her as both a friend and as a rival, as someone to both love and hate. I've even seen people draw parallels between Ruka's sudden savior appearance and Kaoru from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Ruka tells Juri that you can only get miracles by standing on the backs of others. He won't give a miracle to someone who doesn't deserve it, someone like Shiori, but to Juri he would give everything, even if that meant he might have to make Juri hate him. In order to be her prince, he would also need to kill her prince, so that it doesn't haunt her like how, in the film, Toga haunts Utena. During the fight, Juri tears the rose off herself and forfeits. The scene is somber, as Juri's tears are lost in the rain that engulfs the duelist arena. But Ruka promises that it will be alright. Although I don't like Ruka's conduct, he also provided an opening, and Juri took it, similar to how Utena would provide an opening and Anthe would take it. The Shadow Girls suggest that Ruka had been dying, and now would die. Then there's the chairs. At the start of the episode, Juri looks toward Shiori, Shiori toward Ruka, and Ruka toward Juri. But by the end, Shiori's chair has turned back to Juri, and Juri's chair has turned in Ruka's direction. Does that mean that Juri is now in love with Ruka, and Shiori has feelings for Juri? Maybe, but I think of it more like that's who their attention is on. Not necessarily romantic attention, just attention. However, if Ruka's gone now, and Juri is fixated on his absence, was his victory 100% complete? Also, and I couldn't find a better place to put this, there's no way that Ruka would have been able to predict what would happen during that duel, right? That Utena would cut off Juri's locket? That surely was either a coincidence or a miracle, right? I don't think it's something that was planned out by either Ruka or Anthe or anyone else. But it makes me wonder, if the locket hadn't been cut by Utena, would Juri have given up the duel like this? Did it all hinge on some coincidence? If you have an answer to that, please share it in the comments. I am curious, and I could be missing something. Regardless, now when Shiori runs up to Juri and follows her, Juri doesn't turn back. And later, during the badminton game, Juri turns away from Shiori the way that Miki turns away from Kozue. I think that Juri has moved on. Maybe not completely, but still in important ways that matter. In episode 37, Juri admits, quote, "Even though I was in the student council, all I could do was think about myself. I still only think about myself. Why is it? Why can't I set my feelings free?" So maybe Juri isn't completely fixed, but she is facing her own emotions directly and opening up. Personal progress is a mix of sudden change and gradual change. It always takes action and time. So while Ruka helped her, a large part of her growth is up to her and will require continuous effort moving forward. Not all the healing is going to happen right away. At the end of the series, Juri tells the other student council members the story about how her sister drowned and about how a boy had saved her. And what gets to her is that she doesn't even remember the boy's name. Maybe, in the same way, it's possible that over time, she'll even forget what Ruka did for her too. But perhaps what's more important than the story itself is that Juri is telling it. When Nanami asks why she'd blurt out this story, Juri doesn't have an answer. And I think that makes sense, because Juri has probably never been this honest before. It's awkward, it's random, and it's a bit unclear. But maybe for the first time, Juri was willing to let her guard down, to be vulnerable, and actually open up emotionally to friends. Hey everyone, before I get into Juri's role in all of the other Utena media, I have a little bit of information I'd like to share. Originally, I was going to save this for the end credits, but I'm realizing now that maybe not everyone wants spoilers for the manga or the movie, or isn't as interested in the musicals or Sega Saturn video game. While I think all that stuff is super interesting, I also respect if you want to stop here, because this is where my discussion of the anime mostly ends. However, before you go, this is what I wanted to pass along. First off, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break from Utena, in order to alternate in some other projects for my channel, and when I return to this series, there's going to be a few changes. Due to his schedule and current life situations, the Unplugged Professor, the fantastic other editor and voice of these videos, is going to be stepping away from the project, either entirely or for the most part. Moving forward, I'm going to miss his great voice acting and truly wild visual edits. I appreciate what he's given us so far, and wish him the best with his other ventures. The other big change is more structural. Originally, my plan was to make this a 10-part series. The first episode was going to be the introduction, and then each episode after would focus on a different single character. However, I've decided to condense this series down into a smaller number of videos, but still cover the same amount of material. In other words, the next video that I have planned will be on 3 characters together: Saionji, Toga, and Nanami. Condensing them into one video makes sense for the channel, should also help me avoid burnout on this honestly intimidating project, and also reduce a bit of redundancy, since those 3 characters already have such intersecting stories. I'll end up talking so much about Toga during the Saionji and Nanami parts that I might as well combine them into one episode. It might be long, but I get the sense that most of the people viewing this type of video don't mind that. So thank you very much for watching this far, and if you decide to step out, that's totally cool. I do ask that if you've liked this video up to this point, please show the algorithm that by sending a like my way. I know it's redundant for YouTube, but it really does help push videos like this that are a bit more niche. And if you're not subscribed, but you are interested in more Utena content, maybe subscribe. That being said, watching the video itself really helps me out, so thank you for your time. And for the rest of you who want to check out the manga, movie, Sega Saturn game, light novels, all that stuff, fasten those seatbelts, because here we go. In an interview printed in the Laserdisc liner notes, the author of the Revolutionary Girl Utena manga, Chiyo Saito, had this to say about the idea of making Juri gay in her version of the story.
Well, if I'd been told to do it, I think I probably would have, since it would have been interesting. I don't object to drawing same-sex content per se, but the way the anime is structured, Utena is far too removed from the center of the drama. And I'm just not really sure that's suited for manga. So to keep much of a connection as possible between Utena and Juri, I made it a love triangle between Utena, Toga, and Juri. In a magazine more directed toward fanatics, or one whose readers were older, however, it might be okay to set the main character to one side like that.
Juri is almost a completely different character in the manga. Shiori doesn't exist. Instead, Juri is in love with Toga, who in the anime, mind you, she had opposed enough to lend Utena her sword so that she could defeat him. When Toga takes a hit from Saionji while defending Utena, Toga ends up in the hospital from his injuries, and Juri is so upset that he got hurt because of Utena that she lashes out and slaps her. Juri says that the reason Toga had intervened to save Utena is that she couldn't duel if she was injured. It's not like Toga likes her or anything. Jeez. Juri's interest in Toga isn't really a secret, but it doesn't look like Toga's reciprocating. He still starts out as something of a playboy in the manga, someone who doesn't get too attached to any one particular girl. So when it appears that Toga might actually have feelings for Utena, it alarms Juri. And Saionji says it's true, that Toga has actually fallen in love. And this sends Juri over the edge. She starts bullying Utena, flipping over her lunch in the cafeteria, and making her sing solo in morning mass, which apparently is a thing that exists at Otori Academy in the manga. Soon, Juri challenges Utena to a duel, and adds the stipulation that if Utena loses, she can't show her face to the Rose Bride or Toga ever again. Clearly, Juri's reasons to fight in the manga have more to do with Toga than anything else. And when Juri inevitably loses, Toga adds insult to injury by saying that it was Juri's fault for losing, because she let her guard down, which sends Juri running off crying. She falls into such a depressive state after losing that her friend Miki becomes concerned. In the manga, Juri and Miki do seem to be closer, and they're known popularly as the handsome duo, with Juri additionally getting called the beautiful leopard behind her back. While they are friends, Juri's ruthless side can still bear its fangs at Miki too, such as when she fences against him with a real sword and no masks on. And she justifies this aggression by emphasizing to Miki it's a lesson in never letting your guard down. Speaking personally here, I have no problem when authors take creative liberties when adapting a story. The manga was being made alongside the anime, and I like that there's differences between them. However, I much prefer the anime version of Juri over her manga counterpart, because reducing Juri's motivations to jealousy and having almost her entire story revolve around Toga ain't great. Also, her bio states that her motto is beautiful lifestyle, beautiful attire, beautiful life. And it's like, in the anime, we know that she models and that she gets jewelry from her modeling. But I never got the sense, either from the anime or the manga, or any other media we'll see later, that Juri's main priority is beauty, enough to make it her life motto. Chiyo Saito's manga also adapts the Ruka subplot through a story called A Deep Azure Shadow. The story picks up with Juri still in her depressive state after losing to Utena, where Juri will stay in bed until after 3 p.m. and not even show up to school. It's in this sorry state that Ruka finds Juri when he reunites with her. In the manga, it's stated that Ruka had formerly been on the student council, where Anthy had even at one point served as his Rose Bride. Dialogue would also suggest that Ruka was the hero that Juri had been trying to emulate. Upon seeing Juri so defeated, Ruka admonishes her for losing her pride and focus, being afraid, and generally sucking. Ruka begins training Utena in fencing and builds her up as a literal replacement and future captain of the fencing team. He then sets up a match between Utena and his former protege, Juri, with the stipulation that if Juri fails, she must do whatever Ruka says. And lose is exactly what Juri does, because during their match, Utena uses a move that Ruka had never taught Juri, resulting in an Utena victory. Now that Juri has to do whatever Ruka wants, Ruka makes her duel Utena one more time in the dueling field. See, Ruka's real wish is for Juri to get her strength and courage back, and he's been using her love for Toga and rivalry with Utena to give her momentum. In the manga, Juri seems much more outwardly interested in Ruka than in the anime, and Toga believes that Juri really had been in love with Ruka from the start. But when he had left the school, her love needed a place to go, and that is why she latched on to Toga. Juri overhears Toga and Ruka talking like this, and consequently, she refuses to be manipulated into fighting. So instead, it's Ruka that ends up fighting Utena, only to wear himself out and choose to surrender by removing his own rose. Exhausted and weak, Ruka explains, quote, "Perhaps because I glimpsed a moment of eternity, even if I didn't win the duel, I knew I'd won the power to revolutionize the world. It's here. The power is right here." in your heart, Juri, and in each tear that falls. Following these events, Toga spells it out for Juri and the reader. While Juri thinks that Ruka has been cold and inconsiderate by not saying his real thoughts and feelings, rather it may be that Ruka is actually being kind and sparing her from the truth. He was dying and in pain, with little time left, and he did everything he could to help Juri get back on her feet. To me, the manga feels less ambiguous about Ruka being a prince-like character, and an all-around good guy. But alongside that clarity was this renewed feeling, as I read along, that again, Juri's narrative in the manga is all about the boys in her life. Meanwhile, the Adolescence of Utena film leans closer to the anime depiction of the character. Juri is again in love with Shiori, like in the anime, and instead of being called a dangerous leopard behind her back, Wakaba says that all the girls at Otori call Juri the prince. About half an hour into the film, Miki asks Juri why she wants to win the duels, if she in fact hates the Rose Bride so much. Juri's hatred of Anthy isn't expanded upon in the movie itself, but the short manga adaptation of the film gives potential elaboration. In the movie manga, after saying that she hates Anthy in more ways than she can count, Juri explains, quote, "She reminds me of everything I once hated about myself. I've worked so very hard to rid my soul of such filth, so I could live a stronger, more noble life." But which aspects of Anthy remind Juri of her past self? It could be her sexuality, but my gut would tell me that it's more about being submissive and meek. Younger Juri may have been vulnerable and in need of a prince, whereas the current Juri is stronger and is her own prince. But instead of looking back on her past with a growth mentality, this version of Juri, at least, projects her self-loathing onto another girl. Instead of showing compassion toward Anthy, this version of Juri judges her. While Utena comes to view Anthy as her own person, Juri still filters her perception of Anthy unfairly through the lens of her own self-criticism. Back to that question, though, Juri tells Miki that her reason to fight is that she wants power, so that she can be free of everything that constrains her. Then shortly after, as if on cue, Shiori appears from the dark and comments on how lonely she is and how much she just wanted to see Juri's face. And Miki is there observing how Shiori latches onto her, literally holding onto her. The audience can hear his thoughts when he seems to figure it out, that Shiori is that which constrains Juri. During their duel in the movie, Utena takes the offensive, and Juri is on the defensive. Juri says that she doesn't think Utena realizes how much playing Prince halfway is going to cost her. But those doubts may have been resolved when Utena wins. Because when she turns and runs to find Anthy, and also along the way face parts of herself she had buried, Utena appears before Juri in the form of the prince. Now, what really fascinates me is how Shiori is portrayed in the film. She is one of my favorite characters in the Adolescence of Utena film. She's so interesting. Shiori appears throughout the movie alongside Toga, who we come to learn later is dead and wanders around Otori as a ghost. Not only is Shiori able to communicate with Toga, but she confides in him and is very intimate with him. And I don't just mean that they sleep together, although they do that, and it's either metaphorical or literal or somewhere in between, and I'll let you decide that. But I also mean that Shiori is doing things like cleaning his ears, and Toga is painting her toenails. Their relationship is so close and lived in. Shiori tells him that she used to have a prince, but unfortunately, her prince was killed. See, this prince of hers had liked her childhood friend. So when that friend fell off a boat, he jumped in to save her, and drowned. Shiori says this was so stupid. After all, she and the prince were supposed to be together. But instead, he died. So Shiori will never forgive this childhood friend, who she blames for her prince's death. Of course, it's no surprise that this childhood friend is Juri, who Shiori in secret views as wretched and disgusting. Shiori saw the photo in Juri's locket, and it sickened her, and it still haunts her. This movie version of Shiori still wants Juri to suffer, but it's less about wanting to have power over her seemingly perfect and flawless superior, and more that she wants to get back at Juri for, at least in her mind, taking away the person she was really in love with, her prince. And now, Juri has the audacity to fall in love with her to make it all the more twisted. What complicates this is that if you combine Shiori's story with Utena's conversation later in the elevator, it would imply that Toga may be that prince who drowned trying to save Juri. Utena and Shiori both loved Toga, and both see and speak with him at Otori. But Utena uses Toga's sacrifice as inspiration to grow and ultimately to move on, whereas Shiori doubles down on her feelings of misery and anger. Both Utena and Shiori see the injustice, and they both experience loss. However, while Utena wants to become the sort of person who makes the world better for other people, Shiori wants other people to be punished. She's not drawn to roses, but cabbages. And when Utena becomes a literal vehicle for Anthy to escape into the real world, Shiori appears as their opponent. Instead of working with Utena toward a mutual goal, or following behind their lead, she tries to run them off the road. She won't let them accomplish this, because she believes she's the only one who should get to do something this cool. However, she's so focused on jealously trying to drag the other girls down that she doesn't pay attention to the road and ends up crashing. Shiori was the first to lash out at Anthy and Utena, but she's not unique. Not long after, a swarm of pursuers echo Shiori's resentment and pursue like a plague. Juri has a small role in the two light novels, Twin Saplings and Verdant Hopes. She remarks that Saionji's only strong point was his swordsmanship, and she doesn't have a soft spot for Toga, who she criticizes for being cocky and prone to being frivolous. She's referred to as an all-knowing, quote, shadow master of the school, which is less Yu-Gi-Oh! Than I'd hope, and more just that she knows everything that's going on. And, like in the manga, she gets compared to a leopard. However, she still retains that soft spot for Miki and stops him from pushing himself too hard during their fencing practice. She also gives some advice on love while talking to Utena, remarking, quote, "It's okay to fall in love with someone. But if you fall in love too deeply, it will hurt you. That's just how it is." End quote. Shiori may not be in the light novels, but these remarks seem to relate to that plotline in the anime and movie. At one point, while she's wearing her fencing mask, Juri says to herself, so quietly that Miki couldn't hear, quote, "You can't forget some things unless you cry until your tears run out." End quote. Throughout all of her incarnations, despite all the differences, Juri remains a character privately tortured by unrequited love. In the Utena Sega Saturn game, one of the first impressions of Juri occurs when she scares away guys who are hitting on the player character. She appears to the protagonist as someone who is very strong, but shortly after, she makes a remark that she wishes she were stronger. As she invites the player character to come to fencing practice, Juri motions toward her concealed locket and says that becoming physically stronger helps one gain confidence, which implies another potential through line between all these different incarnations of Juri. Pushing herself to become the best at fencing is a way to become physically stronger, which also strengthens her resolve and her willpower. But in at least some of the versions of these stories, that strong willpower may not be enough if she's trying to do this on her own without any support. Juri's power is impressive at the school. Wakaba says that people get expelled if they go against Juri. Even teachers can be dismissed if they are on her bad side. Apparently, the popular places in town are her personal territory. But if the player decides to pursue a friendship with Juri, they actually can have a lot in common. The player character reveals that her parents used to fence, and she quickly earns Juri's respect by not giving up during their practice match. While she continues to be guarded with her emotions, Juri reciprocates the player's trust. Juri will defend the player character against Nanami and her squad. And if you give Juri a cake you made in class, she'll thank you for it and tell you that it doesn't matter if it's good or not. Because while you can buy something delicious with money, something made from the heart is harder to come by. While Juri can appear intimidating to outsiders, as you become friends with her, you see more of her kindness and good nature. If you decide to pursue the Juri route, throughout the story, the player character will imply that no, she is not in love with Juri. But at the same time, she also appears to be enamored by her. After Juri intervenes a second time on the player character's behalf, Nanami questions if the rumors are true, if Juri is a lesbian. Juri maintains her resolve in the face of this accusation, and Nanami is quickly intimidated and sent packing. If you complete the Juri route, she shows you the photo in her locket and opens up to you about Shiori. The player character says that no, it's not strange for two women to be in love, because she also has feelings for Juri. In this ending, Juri defeats the brainwashed members of the student council one by one. First Saionji, then Miki, and then Toga. Meanwhile, Utena holds her own against the antagonist character, Chigusa Sanjuin, for long enough for Juri and the player character to figure out the way to stop her for good. Before the player's avatar leaves Otori and transfers out, Juri approaches her and thanks her for her words and support. Although Juri can't reciprocate the player character's love, she does give her a locket with a picture of herself in it. At her new school, the player keeps her past at Otori a secret, but she wears this locket around her neck as a memento. On one hand, it's kinda cute and nice of Juri to give her something to remember her by. But on the other hand, that same type of locket has represented so much pain in Juri's life that it unintentionally can feel like such an ominous, loaded gesture to give her a locket with her photo in it. Overall, Juri in the Sega Saturn game wants the player character to be able to live out a normal life that's simple and peaceful, one where she can have friends, study for school, and fall in love like other girls do. Probably the funniest thing to me about her role in the game is that out of all the possible locations you could think of where Juri would go in town to hang out, she hangs out at one of the weirdest. So if you want to just play a little game here right now, and if you don't know the answer to this, just think in your head, based on everything you know of Juri, everything you've heard about Juri so far, where do you think she spends her free time around the campus and around the town? That's right, the arcade. So Juri's founded this game center where she's like a freaking god at this one arcade fighting game. Like, one of the days you visit her, she has defeated 200 opponents in succession. 200! And of course, the only one who could defeat her is you, the player character. And perhaps more could be said about the potential overlap between Juri's arc and Chigusa Sanjuin's backstory. But this video is already pretty long and thorough, and maybe that's best left either for another day or for someone else's passion project. Because right now I am shifting to the musicals, in particular The Bud of the White Rose and The Blooming Rose of Deepest Black. Thank you again to Empty Movement for helping with this footage, and shout out to Barafubuki for the translation. In the first musical, Nanami sings a song to the audience that introduces Juri, wherein Juri is perceived by teachers as an exemplary student, but it's best to stay 10 meters away from her because she's like a ferocious creature. In the second musical, Mikage and Mamiya refer to Shiori's connection to Juri as parasitic, and you can really see how toxic it is by how much glee Shiori expresses while extracting the sword from Juri. Shiori's stated goal for fighting Utena is to win, and by winning, prove that she is stronger than Juri. And the duel is presented visually as a simultaneous clash with both Shiori and Juri against Utena at the same time. And lastly, there's Chiyo Saito's epilogue manga After the Revolution. In the story Beautiful Thorns, Juri wakes up from a recurring dream about drowning and forgiveness. As the dream lingers in her mind like a Cranberries song, Juri steps forward to compete at the 2017 Tokyo Fencing World Cup, where Miki watches from the audience. There, Juri faces a particularly difficult opponent, and she was about to lose her match when a blackout occurs that postpones the rest of the tournament. While everyone else is saying that Juri's opponent had been a woman, Juri saw them as a man, as specifically Ruka, wearing the Rose Crest ring. As our Queen of Fencing models for a shoot at Atori Academy, she turns ideas over in her head and concludes that she's going to retire from fencing soon, because she'd rather quit while at the top than embarrass herself with defeat. That's when we learn that Shiori has been Juri's agent, and actually she'd seen this coming. Although it's a hard topic to bring up, Shiori also says that she's going to be the agent for someone new as well, the person who appears to Juri as Ruka. Juri makes a whole scene, and Shiori leaves all the more determined to be this new contender's agent. Remember how I said earlier that I'd like more flashbacks with younger Juri and younger Shiori? Well, Chio Saito actually provided that in After the Revolution. We learn that Juri had been in love with Shiori from a young age. She compares Shiori to a beautiful princess from another world, whereas Juri viewed herself as ugly, the kind of plain person who no one would ever fall in love with. When she overheard that Shiori was drawn to elegant princes, that gave young Juri the idea to become a prince herself and pick up fencing to impress Shiori and just maybe get the girl. I think this is such an interesting twist on the characters, because in the anime, we have all these feelings of insecurity that come from Shiori, and Shiori's responses to these insecurities is to try to drag Juri down to her level. Whereas this tells us a story about Juri where she also felt insecure, but instead of trying to drag anyone down, Juri tries to become that better person. Now, granted, I don't think that trying to change your whole identity to impress someone you have a crush on is a good idea, and obviously that takes it to a pretty big extreme. This is still a lot less outwardly malicious than what Shiori showed in the anime, despite having a pretty similar root cause. However, there's even one more twist. In this version of events, in the past, Shiori had introduced Ruka as her fiancé. Shiori and Ruka had been betrothed since age 7. So, while After the Revolution depicts Juri probably the most like the anime does, I'd still say this is a new version of the narrative, because she was never in love with Ruka like in the manga side story. Instead, Ruka, in this version, was the one who took Shiori away from her. This was the man she could never compete with. He was destined to win Shiori from the start. When the tournament resumes, in the middle of the match, lightning strikes, and Ruka summons Juri to the dueling arena, where they continue their duel. Shiori is there, dressed as the Rose Bride, saying that the person she likes is strong and honorable, just like a prince. Afraid that she's going to lose again, Juri looks up toward the castle and yearns for the power of a prince. On cue, Utena descends like the new Dios, and answers her prayer by granting Juri a ring and the power to bring revolution to the world. Then Utena points Juri in a direction, not toward the fight with Ruka, but toward a rainy day at the shore. There, young Juri sees Shiori either jump or fall into the river from the other side, which prompts Juri to dive in after her. Yes, this is another variant on the river story from the ending of the anime. The mileage this one archetypal story has gotten throughout all these different incarnations is honestly wild. In the anime, the person who drowned was forgotten, and that was to save Juri's sister. In the manga, a form of Dios dove in to save child Utena. In the movie, it was Toga who drowned to save Juri, but then consequently also devastating Utena and Shiori, who were in love with him. And then in this final version, it's Ruka that jumps in and dies, saving Juri. Coffin Utena says that she met Ruka before, and that he spoke to her about Juri, how much he respected Juri and admired her. Ruka wanted to help her, so Utena gave him the ring. And in this in-between place, Ruka compliments Juri, saying that she is like Lily, the goddess of battle. Juri returns to the real world, where her defeated opponent is revealed to not actually be Ruka, but some random woman. Juri's locket reappears in her hand with a new engraving under the lid, seemingly from Ruka, simply saying, "Fight, Juri." After this victory, Shiori congratulates Juri and says that she was shining out there, like she always does, like a prince. And Juri makes a decision. She says that she's going to stop fighting for Shiori and for Ruka. Juri isn't going to try to be that prince who can protect her or try to surpass Ruka. No. From now on, She's going to fight simply because she enjoys battle. And that's enough for her. After the revolution doesn't end with Juri and Shiori as a couple. Juri had definitely been in love with Shiori, but there's no clear indication on how Shiori feels about Juri all these years later. But I appreciate that Juri got closure and resolution, and it feels like Juri is walking toward a healthy path. At her worst, Juri Arisugawa can be jealous and a dangerous threat. Someone who could be a prince, but lashes out due to unhealed wounds and self-loathing, who tries to carry all of these burdens on herself and ends up imploding. However, at her best, Juri is someone who keeps getting back up and fights for high ideals. There's something Juri says in this 1997 cassette tape that I think sums up her character pretty well. This is what she says, as translated by Nagumo. Quote, "You're weak, but if you hold on and believe in yourself, then you will never be discouraged. Like me, Arisugawa Juri. However, don't feel embarrassed by your own weakness. When you recognize your weaknesses, only then can you begin to become strong. That is to say, you should be happier now that you've gotten stronger by overcoming one more weakness. Now, lift your head. A wide open road stretches before you, full of possibilities."